when you talk about the moment right now, the next minute of your life, like what's happening right now is all you can control. If you take care of the minute you're in, the years take care of themselves.
You have to really fully understand that you are truly responsible for your own happiness.
We have that negativity bias for a reason. Don't lose it. Don't be stupid, but don't live in it when it's just not necessary. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mind Muscle Connection. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Tyler Weed. Today we're going to talk about negativity bias, which is a thing. You could do a search for that, and you're going to get all kinds of information and research. But that actually wasn't what I intended to do today. It's going to steer that direction because I think that's a great starting point, as I like to say, biology first. But I'm going to lay this out, if you're keeping score at home, in three categories. And if you do look up negativity bias, you're going to see that out of the hundreds of cognitive biases, even though this is kind of a late comer, really didn't show up in research until about 20 years ago, it's one of the most foundational because evolutionarily, we know the brain wants to forget as much useless information as possible. And of course, remember the most critical. Well, the most critical is what keeps you alive. So, I always talk about my grandson because as like a new, fresh little brain just developing, you always see these really weird things. And, he's bumped his head enough times that he knows like to look out for things above him. And he became fearfully afraid, or I should say like terrifyingly afraid of water, because at some point I'm sure he, dumped a glass of water in his face in the bathtub, or maybe even slipped under the surface. So now even taking him to a fountain downtown, like he sees that water and he'll cling to me and he'll squeal like, no, 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 just shaking. I'm like, holy shit, this kid is afraid.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon he takes his shoes off and he's in the water and he sees it's fun. But I mean, that initial response was like, wow, talk about a snapshot of negativity bias. And think, go back to caveman days, right? Like, what did it take for the first human being to realize like water's bad? Like, hey, look, Harry just jumped in that lake and he never fucking came back. Like that, there must be something down there.
Must have been a witch.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's it. So we created a religion around that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But like you learn. And so negativity is an incredibly useful thing, but it keeps us in that state where if you're a negative person, and this is where it really seeps into these next two categories. So first of all, just understand that a hyperactive amygdala, always being afraid, always being incredibly risk averse, everything's negative, everything's going to, get you, probably not a great place to live in the 21st century. Like super positive people, and we kind of learn some of those things either by self-help or because we just realize I don't want to be a negative person. That's kind of, draining, and it's awful. So I can personally look at some of the happiest people around me who, as an absolute just intentional practice, they ignore the negative, they ignore it. And as kind of a natural skeptic, I see that as kind of delusional. You're trying to insulate yourself away from bad things. So there's a middle ground. There's a useful pocket where we need to be a little on guard. We need to be a little skeptical. But I certainly, because my negativity bias is strong, I'm good at being negative. I need to talk myself into being happy sometimes and being positive. So all that said, Tyler, I know we're going to really just kind of unravel this, but what are your first thoughts about the whole topic?
Well, maybe you need to stop and smell the roses a little bit more.
It is
yeah, but
time.
Yeah, and I think, and that's kind of a question I've asked myself over the last couple of years. I think with this might be a little bit of a tangent, but with kind of the advent of a 24-hour news scroll now, it's very easy to get caught up in this negative mindset, and you've got to ask yourself, at what point is ignorance actually good? Like, right? They say ignorance is bliss. And I think to a point that is quite true, because like I can be a very, skeptical look at it. Well, shit, like this is just the way it is. And you know what? That can be depressing and that can drag you into this negative mindset because what's the point, right? You see all of this, destruction and death and all this negativity around us. You have to be like, I like what you said, having this intentional practice of being positive and having that positive outlook of life, of glass half full type of thing, because it's easier. I think, again, we kind of talk about how easy it is to do as little as possible, right? We're just kind of naturally want to do that. We don't want to work hard for things. We have to push ourselves to work hard. Kind of in the same vein, I think at this point, it's very easy to just slip into this mindset of having this, negativity bias that now then starts to permeate, throughout the rest of your life, because you do get so insinuated with it and just in your face. It's very hard to avoid. And so, to take that actual conscious effort to put the phone down. Okay, I'm only going to look at the news Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or, whatever that looks like, practicing meditation, self-care, that has to be intentional. You have to put that work into it because it is going to help to bring into that balance. And I think for myself, it really then started to challenge me of like, okay, like maybe we do need to be a little bit ignorant, not in a negative sense, but just to kind of protect your own self and how you view the world and everything else around you.
I was doing a live chat, just one of the support things I do for our clients and coaches. And the topic came up of just sleep. Somebody had a question about like, I just having such a hard time getting sleep. And so we went through all the biochemical things, caffeine and so forth. But most times, and I used to struggle with this when I was going through a period of anxiety, there's just that rumination and you're catastrophizing things. And one of our coaches or clients kind of chimed in with some great advice. She said, okay, I've struggled with this and I've had to have this routine where I do these things. I go to bed around the same time and I do this, and it's kind of a wind down process. But one of the things she said, which was interesting, is I've talked with my husband and he's not allowed after dinner to bring up anything serious. Like we're not going to have any serious conversations about our marriage, about life, like, philosophical things. Like I need my mind to be quiet. And that's what you're getting at in terms of having some actual training and neurologically, we do change our brain. That's what mindfulness and meditation does. But I do want to come back to that middle ground where for lifters, for bodybuilders, for athletes, I see such an incredibly almost sweet naivete with beginners. So think of like I have a friend.
I want my pro card.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's the exact opposite. But for example, one of my friends was in here training with me today, and he's doing his first powerlifting contest ever, first meet. And he's excited, he's nervous, he's got his goals. Man, I just want to get used to it. I don't know what I'm going to do. Here are my lift totals I'm going to shoot for. Has no expectation of doing any certain way, not winning, etc. And so he's almost expecting, or at least he's making himself okay with a real negative outcome if he categorized it that way. For him, the positive outcome is just doing it, just having the challenge, seeing what it's like. But again, imagine if your expectation was so high that a negative impact is louder, it's more amplified. And that's part of negativity bias. We feed into that. And so I think of like the Stoics. They're kind of known for embracing the suck. Back in the day, they were like, hey, death is a good thing. You should welcome death, because if you look forward to death and you're going to take advantage of every day, you are going to stop and smell the roses. And they put emphasis on work and discipline. So you almost expect things to be hard. And then that just kind of brings the temperature of your brain down a bit. And that also feeds into negativity bias.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're setting yourself up like with these high expectations, you're setting yourself up for this like huge bounce back towards that negative bias where, hey, you know what, like someone who is a beginner, say they're going into that first powerlifting meet and they're expecting to win the whole thing in their weight category, as opposed to, hey, yeah, like your client, I'm going to go in, I went through the process, this is my first one, I'm going to set some PRs, I'm going to learn a lot from this experience. And yeah, I mean, if I win, awesome, but you know what, my first time, it may not happen. Man, now that what that's going to do is just help him once he does go through it, give this push of motivation. And then now he can really start to raise those expectations, because now he has a building block if he wants to continue in powerlifting. Now it's like, oh, okay, I know where I am in the hierarchy of these powerlifters. Now I have something concrete to work towards. Okay, now we can start to shift some of that expectancy as we start to gain experience, as we start to take things maybe a little bit more seriously, and we move from that beginner to intermediate to advanced stage. So there's almost, those steps that you have to take. And by having, I think, a realistic view of, where yourself, where you're, whoever you're working with, tells you where you're at, you got to have those people that trust you. Man, you're almost now setting yourself up down the road to be able to push harder, to have more motivation, to have more drive, instead of, hey, like, I thought I was going to get first, I am the worst power lifter ever, I'm never doing this again. Well, man, maybe we should have different expectations, more realistic expectations, because now we know where we need to go, what we need to do. It drives everything else that we're going to do from here on out.
Yeah, it makes me think of when I was feeling pretty anxious, and it was kind of a biochemical thing that was happening. As neuroscientists say, what fires together wires together. So I was teaching myself to be anxious in certain moments. I would get this hyper negativity, a stimulus that shouldn't have created anxiety in me would, because I had just hyper catastrophized that. And so I literally went through 2 or 3 therapists. I was reading books. I was doing meditation. I was doing all this stuff to physically try to create this better environment in my brain. And it worked like a charm. I created a way that I could almost self-hypnotize. I could self-hypnotize myself to sleep. I just completely got out of that. And now recently I heard a couple podcasts where some psychologists talked about even easier, more fruitful ways of doing it just by self-talk. Like, let's say you're just kind of working on not being as negative. At the end of every day, think of something great that happened that day. Think of what makes you happy. And that was part of my I would say almost neurochemical recreation, where I would create this happy space in my brain. I would create these images in my mind, and that would be where I would go every time. And that's how you kind of create that hypnotic state. But I think, again, of people that are just naturally so happy. My wife is one of them. I have a client right now that I swear she's the happiest person on the planet. And again, I think, okay, like, are you okay moving toward the center where you accept negativity well, or are you really, really just delusional? And I think they're just masters at realizing I'm a lot happier if I'm happy. Life is a lot better if I just don't focus on those negative things. So, it's hard for me because I'm always going to look at it from that negative side and try and climb my way out. But it's really a skill we can develop.
Yeah, you have to really fully understand that you are truly responsible for your own happiness, not just in the things that you externally do, but the things that you internally do as well. We're so conditioned to buy the next thing, next dopamine hit in this external. And look at the therapy levels we have nowadays, and how many people are having to, go those routes. And it's an amazing thing. I'm glad we're having this and making it a normal discourse within the public. But, how much of it is because we've kind of forgotten to have this internal happiness as well of, I can, if maybe for the lack of a better term, create my own dopamine hit whenever I want by just having that self-talk. And it's having to now, we come back to it, do the work, re-internalize, rework that brain chemistry to start doing that. And it's so easy to go that other route.
Well, I think part of my recovery from that was one of the very first steps of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is if you can define it, if you can name it, if you can visualize it, if you see that it's a thing. My negativity is bad. My negative, well, that's kind of negative. I shouldn't say negative. My negativity is not useful. I'm overusing that
Yeah.
evolutionary skill and trait. See how negative I am. I even
Right. It just, and not even thinking about it. And that's how easy it is, because it's so grooved into our way of thinking. Like, you really have to have that gap to catch yourself.
Well, here's another advantage I have just because of my time on the planet. There's research that shows people's happiness is really, really high when they kind of reach adulthood, 20 to 25, and then it craters. And then you become your happiest ever once you get over about age 50. And I swear that's exactly correct. And it's because your kids are grown and they're not sucking the life out of you. But B, you realize, I'm kind of winding things down. Like I look at all the things that I would strive for and work hard for, and I feel responsible to my clients, my employees, my partners. All of this stuff, I just like go, go, go. I told a friend of mine who also owns a business today that in 25 years of business, I've only taken 1 2-week vacation. Never have taken more than a week off except that one time. And I'm like, why? Like, why? Because I felt like I had to. And that's my problem. That wasn't true, but that was that hypervigilance. And so I would hate for people to have to wait until they're later in life to truly stop and smell the roses. I would hope everybody can learn these things. But if you do see that on the horizon, like why do people get happier? They just have that mindset of, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have all of these self-constraining boundaries that I thought I had to put up around me. And again, that means that I'm still able to tend to that evolutionary bias of I need to be careful. I need to not take risks that I can't afford. And I need to be vigilant in some areas and not be stupid. But again, in my life today, am I just overusing that trait? And I think for a lot of people who struggle with this, the answer is a resounding yes by choice.
Yeah. As you were saying that, like when they reach this and they crash, I mean, I should technically be in my crash. So,
you're crashing.
I'm crashing right now. Yeah. These podcasts might get a little dark as the year goes on, but no, but yeah. And I think, that kind of just makes me think of, like you say, how do we bottle this up and sell it so that we can do it before we hit that, that 50? Because I think, some things are going to just come with experience and being that old and having that much time and doing the things that you do. That'll certainly be part of it. But I still firmly believe that it's quite possible to tap into that, whatever, call it half of that happiness from an earlier age. Tap into that side that you don't need that experience. And a lot of that comes with a lot of that self-reflection, therapy, really starting to internalize, okay, like what is that talk? What am I telling myself? Where is that self-behavioral talk going with me? And how can I start to create like those images that you talked about? I'll kind of want to talk about once we're done here a little bit more about that. But, can we start to just do that now? And I think, hell yeah, you can certainly do that now. You can do that for your training. Like, I mean, how many pro athletes now talk about just that visualization? Like they'll go over certain plays in their heads hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to groove, and they'll practice it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times so that it's that second nature and they don't even have to think about it anymore. So again, we kind of come back to this. There's a lot of hard work at the beginning, but now if we can get that into just be our second nature, maybe you and I can, become that natural, happy person like your wife.
Yeah, that's my aspiration right there. Yeah. Be like Tracy, get a t-shirt. Be like Tracy. So I'm going to wrap this up with a quick little story of a client that I spoke to today as well. And I'm going to tie it to, you kind of jokingly use that colloquialism, stop and smell the roses. One of my clients who just turned 40 this year is at true like peak physical performance, like strong as an ox, looks like an NFL linebacker, everything is going well in life. And he asked me today, it was really an interesting, subtle remark, like, when do you start losing it? Like, how much muscle mass will I lose? How much strength? And you could see like he he's kind of reached the pinnacle of where he thinks he can be. And he's already feeling that fear, that anxiety, that negativity bias of, I can't, something bad's going to happen. Like I can't stay at this great, place, too long, forever. And just being able to have the conversation in a relative sense, like, the average person loses a pound of lean body mass a year after, they're in their 30s and so forth. But, I can't squat and deadlift 500 pounds anymore. Obviously, I've lost some strength. I've lost some lean body mass, but compared to other 52-year-olds, like pretty damn well. And, when I get to 60, when I get to 70, like, it's not all about what you're losing. It's about where you are in that moment. And, these are ancient, Zen kind of mantras, but when you talk about the moment right now, the next minute of your life, like what's happening right now is all you can control. You should be happy, be present, all of those things that become so cliche, man, if you can really actually embody that, there is, I'm going to borrow this from a TED talk I heard, again, something, probably very Buddhist. If you take care of the minute you're in, the years take care of themselves. And I think that's a really big part. I'll be negative and I'll let that bias swing me when there's true risk. But if there's not real risk, if I'm just making that shit up in my head, is it stealing the present happiness and self-acquisition, attainment I could really have? And the answer, of course, is yes. So, we have that negativity bias for a reason. Don't lose it. Don't be stupid, but don't live in it when it's just not necessary. So, perfect. All right, man. Well, I will let you guys go. We will see you next time in the Mind Muscle Connection. Until then, really practice some of these things. If you can take away one nugget of information from each one, Tyler and I would definitely, know that our chats are worthwhile here. And keep making comments. I know I get people who email me. A lot of my clients love, especially what we're talking about, Tyler. So thank you. We'll see you guys next time in the Mind Muscle Connection.